Councilman Scott, welcome to the program. City officials have warned that Corpus Christi could be out of water or really face a dire emergency by December of 2026, just a little more than a year from now, if there is not additional supply. You voted to continue the desalination project. That's not going to happen now. There are several emergency projects underway right now, but they're short term. What happens next for the city?
Yeah, so I will tell you that we were weeks away from what I call solving the riddle. We have a series of wells that we're drilling along the Nueces River on land the city owns, which is really economical. And the Texas TCEQ has given us permission to put that water in the river for 3 years. That gives us 3 years to go solve the riddle. Desalination was the resolution. It was the solution. It was staged to come on in the fall of 28, which is about the time that these temporary bed and banks permits were going to run out. And so that was the answer. I was super disappointed in the city's inability to move forward. This is a project we've worked on for 10 years. We literally have spent and borrowed and spent $230 million that we're going to have to repay without any new water, which means the local ratepayer is going to be saddled with $8 a month for no water for the next 10 years. Incidentally, if we'd have finished the project, the rates would go up $11. And so it's $8 to do nothing and then $11 to have 30 million gallons a day. What you're going to hear going forward is a lot of delusionary statements. Oh, we got this project. This one's going to come online. I will tell you that the smart people that the city hired are telling us all the alternative water supply projects will not come on in time.
Wow.
But we have no choice but to go look at them again.
And to make sure I'm clear, pumping the groundwater out of that land that the city owns into the Nueces River, that's just a temporary thing. After 3 years, is the permit up? The city has to stop that?
That's correct. It's called a temporary bed and banks permit that allows us to put the water in the river for 3 years. I don't do this every day, but I suspect if we went back to them and said, hey, we're a year out, can
Yeah.
you give us one more year? I mean, I think they want to help, but it is a 3-year temporary bed and banks permit that is scheduled to run out in late 2028.
And to make sure I'm clear also, is the desal project dead altogether now? No way to bring it back?
Yeah, so I think that the current project with Kiewit, which incidentally built the big desalination plant in Carlsbad, California, so they've done it before, and that's who we'd hired to
Right.
take us through a progressive design build project. I think they're out, and I think they're frankly happy to move on away from us. There is an alternative that we could go to the second company. It's Acciona, came in second in that process. We could go to them and say, hey, would you guys be interested in being our designated participant? I'm hopeful we do that, by the way. I don't know if Acciona is interested. Keep in mind that the state of Texas has allowed us to borrow up to $757 million of very low interest funds,
Yeah.
but only to do a progressive design build project and only at that specific site. And so if we completely walk away from this, we eat $230 million. We just put it in a pile, pour gasoline on it, and burn it. And so there is an alternative to go to Acciona and say, would you guys like to take the ball and run with it? They'll have to start over. It's going to cost us $50 million and probably a year, but we could do that.
And no guarantee that the other company
Oh,
would go
no.
forward.
No. We made a mess of things in Corpus Christi. Yeah, there's no guarantee that they would want the project. There's no guarantee that, we think it's $1.2 billion. That's what Kiewit has given us at a 10% design. They feel pretty good about that number, but you add a year in the process and, no telling what that number could be.
Do you expect that Corpus Christi is now going to have to look at restricting companies and residents from using water? Do you think that the city is going to get into that pinch?
Yeah, I do. I mean, when you just look at the numbers and you look at the data, we do not have a project permitted, funded, and online now to meet our demand in 2028. So we basically have we get water from two locations, some lakes out in the west and a pipeline, we call it the eastern side, that goes up. That pipeline is going to continue to provide water. It comes from two other watersheds. Um, but without the lake water, we can't meet our demand. So when people say you're going to run out of water, no, we're never going to run out of water. The question is, can we meet our demands? And the answer is no in fall, winter of 2028, unless it rains. Now, these projections are based on an ongoing severe drought. If the drought breaks, then all bets are off. But I think we're looking at curtailment is what we call it. I think we're looking at NEIs. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, Corpus Christi is the third largest crude export community in the world. You know, we supply much of Europe's natural gas. You know, we have huge plastic manufacturing. What happens in Corpus affects the world and certainly the state of Texas. And so this is a big deal.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that next. Industry is warning of dire consequences here. Do you
Yes, sir.
think the city not moving ahead with this desalination project is going to affect jobs there in the
Yes.
coastal bend?
Well, yeah, it affects two parts. One, I think 8, 10, I think there's probably 14, $16 billion of new economic development that has moved on. Some of them are, you know, they've announced. So number one, we've lost the ability to grow our community. Number two, I'm familiar with most of industry, and they were completely supportive of Inner Harbor. By the way, we've brought them to the table 10 years ago as we started this process to look at seawater desalination, and they've been part of it. And they supported that location. They supported the state funding. They helped us get the state funding. I think they are all desperate that we find a solution, and they are preparing for curtailment. Now, keep in mind, Flint Hills and Corpus Christi supplies the jet fuel to DFW. There's also a pipeline that supplies jet fuel to Bergstrom, and they're building another pipeline to San Antonio to supply that airport. You know, think about that. You know, we are fueling Texas, and we're about to curtail.
But you think that the economy is going to be negatively impacted by this
Yeah.
lack of water. I mean,
Well, I
companies
mean,
don't want to reinvest if you can't guarantee the basics, right?
there's a couple of parts to that. One, yeah, no one's going to reinvest. And that part of that, you know, 14, 16 billion is probably $1 billion of projects that local industry is chosen to spend elsewhere. But think about it. So, and this is simple math, but if we curtail a $10 billion site and they're only doing 50%, their value drops 50%, which means their tax payments to the community drop 50%. I mean, it's a ripple effect. And by the way, if you curtail, you don't just curtail industry. By state law, we can't say we're going to curtail industry, but we're going to leave residential alone. Everybody gets curtailed. And so this is a profound situation we found ourselves in. The only solution is if it rains, or pick up the ball and run again with the Inner Harbor site, which, by the way, has the gubernatorial support, TCEQ support, you know, Texas Water Development Board support. That's probably the only. You could cobble up some other smaller projects, but I promise you, when you get in the weeds, they cost as much as Inner Harbor desal, and they're going to take the same amount of time.
For people who aren't as familiar with this project, you know, the city's been working on it for 6 or 7 years here. Project costs for this exploded from what, 160 million to more than $1 billion. It's gotten very political over the last few years. How did this project get off the rails?
Yeah, so if you look at other similar projects during that time frame, it escalated like everything else has escalated. Number one, it was 10 million gallons a day. Then it was 20 million gallons a day. And now it's 30 million gallons a day. And if you look at other projects in Corpus Christi, they've escalated similarly. So I don't, you know, I wasn't around when we were talking about a 200 or 400 million dollar project. To me, it is what it is, right? I don't want to spend $1 billion too, but it is what it is. And keep in mind, this is not just something somebody threw on the wall. This is Kiewit, internationally recognized company. This Sprees and Nichols, highly respected engineering group. Part of the process had what they called ICE, independent cost estimators. They're those guys that sit in the room and come on board. They were gonna review the numbers, and so that was gonna be what it was gonna be. This is really, at its core, a battle between industry, pro-growth supporters, and a group of environmentalists that don't want to see the industrial community grow.
But those environmentalists got 6 people on board to vote against it and kill it,
They
though. At the
did,
end of the
yeah,
day, that's
yeah, they did,
surprising.
yeah, absolutely. A couple of things. One, they filled the council chambers, and some council
Right.
members, count their numbers in the room. I don't, by the way. I figure most of the Corpus Christians are expecting me to do the right thing, so they're at home making dinner, teaching the kids, doing the homework. This goes back several cycles. There have been environmental groups out of Austin that
Yeah.
have spent $1 million, in excess of $1 million, getting council members elected. So there's some
Okay.
support there. It's expensive, right? And so if somebody comes along and say, "Hey, I got a better project at half the price and half the time," it sounds good, and what has happened in the last 6 months is the council has turned to our employees and our consulting groups and said, "We just don't believe, we just don't
Mm.
believe you." Somebody came to the podium and said they've got a better project at half the time and half the cost, and they must be right. And so that's really what's happened.
Councilman, let's zoom out for a moment here. Beaumont, Houston, Brownsville, the Valley, they're all, likely looking at this as well too. Do you
Yes,
think
sir.
the decision by Corpus Christi City Council sets a negative precedent when it comes to desalination projects?
Absolutely.
Think
Absolutely.
so?
Without a doubt. And we knew that. We've been told for months that the state of Texas is watching us and watching this project. Um, so I think it has profoundly negative impacts for the future of seawater desalination. Now, part of it is the structure that this project is operated under, where a city council gets elected every 2 years. And so the last city council started this. They're the ones that borrowed the money. And
Mm.
this city council is the one that terminated the project. So I think you're going to look for people are going to look for projects that can be centered under more long-term leadership, because that's really what's happened. I mean, we were one vote away, maybe two, from doing this project. Keep in mind, we're only at 10% design. When
Yeah.
you get to 60, which would have been 4 or 6 months, that's when we would pull the trigger. And so I think you're going to look for projects that have more stable leadership.
And last question on this. Texans, outside the coastal bend might look at this and say, Listen, we're a state that needs water here. If Corpus can't do it, can anybody do it in Texas?"
I think that's a real issue. And I think what we heard from Austin, from our, Austin leaders, was just that. And we've said that the state of Texas is watching us. The state of Texas is our partner, and we got the loan from the Texas Water Development Board.
Right.
We're fully permitted. Keep in mind that you're going to hear other projects, there are alternatives. None of them are permitted. The only fully permitted, funded project that we had in our basket was Inner Harbor desalination. And so it puts a big black eye on future desalination projects for the whole state of Texas. And I'm disappointed in that. I thought we have a good project. Maybe the council comes back in a week or two and tries to reach out to Acciona and see if they're interested, which again would mean we saddled $50 million of expenses we can't use again, and a 1-year delay. But it would signal that, we're willing to move forward. We know this. Most of us know that the state of Texas is watching. And I promise you, I'm disappointed in our decision.
And not to overstate or misstate, but you think this decision by council could impact the economy there along the coastal bend there in Corpus?
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. So for months, I was hearing from bond counsel and some of our financial guys that communities around Corpus were talking to their bond rating agencies because of the profoundly negative impact
Wow.
on their community, because we now can no longer articulate the ability to meet supply in the long term. So it's a big deal to Corpus. It's a big deal to our surrounding communities, and the financial community is watching this closely, and it's a negative.
Councilman, it's good to see you. Thank you for the insight.
Thank you very much, sir.